Hello, kiddos. Good afternoon. You are now watching your art lesson of this week. And we're going to go ahead and continue with the element of art, space. This week's assignment, which is the one we're looking at right now, is due October the 9th, 2020 by 11:59 p.m. Remember, let's go over some of the expectations for completing this activity. Currently, I'm in a mode that is not compatible for this assignment. I'm going to show you now what you need to do. I'm going to exit presentation mode and go into work mode. The reason being is because, notice here on the side, there's something called drag and drop. This is not visible if I am in presentation mode. So I'm going to make sure to always remain in work mode, which is what I have it in right now. So what you will need to do, the first step you will need to do, make sure you read all these instructions. Reminder that you do not have to put the presentation in presentation mode, right? The way it asks, and also drag and drop, which is what I just mentioned. Okay, the written response. Anytime you see this little box right here, you need to go ahead and type something in that box. Anytime you're expected to type, right? Again, the box is there. But let's look at what it says. To practice, type your name into this box. So go ahead and type your name. I'm going to leave it blank for presentation purposes. Let's continue. All right. So slide organization. Slides in this document are informational. Some, okay? That means that they're only meant to give you information. So you only need to read through it. And they're not interactive. All you need to do on the informational slides is read. Okay. Make sure not to skip over any of these slides because they contain important information and they'll help you complete the rest of the slides. To make sure you don't miss out on activities on all of these slides, right, that are interactive, there is a magical rainbow on the top corner. And this is how it will appear. So interactive, you'll see a rainbow. Not interactive, no rainbow. Let's continue. So again, we're working with space. Last week we learned about positive and negative space. This week we'll learn about the illusion of depth. So depth, let's read it. Depth is the measurement of how far back something goes into a space, right? In order to create the illusion of depth in a two-dimensional piece of artwork, artists pay careful attention to the following 6 areas, and these are important. Number 1 is overlapping, 2 is scale, 3 is placement, 4 is detail, 5 is color and value, which we're going to be learning about very soon, and linear perspective. Overlapping. Overlapping is when one object partially covers another object. This helps create the illusion of depth because space must be present for one 3-dimensional object to cover another. So let's go ahead and do the following. Let's look at this picture over here. The pumpkins in the image above are clearly overlapping. There are some in front of the others in the middle and back. So look at this. Drag and drop the shapes from the sidebar, which is right here, into the box below. Make sure they overlap, okay? Be very mindful of how you place them. You will drag and drop. Notice how if I put them close to each other, they'll overlap. Be very mindful of your placement of your shapes. Once you're done, leave it alone and don't move them back because I need to see what work you've done. As you work on this, it should save. Up here, you should be able to tell if your work is saving or not. It says last edit was seconds ago, so it's saving as I work. Make sure you check this little spot up here to be sure your work is saving as you go through it. Overlapping layers in artwork. Having a distinct foreground, middle ground, and background can also help create the illusion of depth in an artwork. So let's look at these 3 things. My background is way back here. My middle ground is what I see in the middle. And my foreground is what I can see closest to me. So again, the foreground is the layer closest to the viewer. It's often nearest to the bottom of the page, though not always. The middle ground is the layer of objects behind the foreground. And past the middle ground is the background. And we hear the word background a lot when we're talking about artwork. This contains things that are furthest away. So I want you to think of this. When an object is in the background, it usually will be a little smaller than whatever's in the middle ground, and whatever's in the foreground will be larger than whatever's in the middle or in the background, because it is closer to us. Notice these trees in the middle ground back here, and we have our foreground here, right? Notice how small these trees are. And look at the background, the mountains. They look rather small, but as you approach them, they'll become larger. That is the magic of perspective and the illusion of depth. So our next slide, which is interactive because it has the rainbow, says label the layers. Identify the layers in the image below by placing the foreground, middle ground, and background title cards on the top of each area. So I will take these labels and label accordingly. What I feel my middle ground is, what I feel my foreground is, what I feel my background is. Remember, background is whatever's way at the back. Middle ground is whatever's between the center and the foreground. Okay? So the foreground, remember, that is the part that is closest to me, that is the front. That is what the foreground is. Once I'm done, I will leave my work there. I'm checking to see if my work is saving, and it says last edit was seconds ago. So I'm going to continue. This is an informational slide. Let's read it. Scale refers to the size of one object in relation to another object. Scale refers to the size of one object in relation to the other object. And in art, it is never referring in terms of weight. It's in terms of size, so how big or small something is. When things are further away in an artwork, they typically appear smaller than something that is closer. Notice how the tree that's furthest back is smaller than the tree in front of it. In reality, these trees are probably about almost the same size, but since the tree in the back is furthest away, the scale of it is a lot smaller. So, scale. Based on what you know about scale, which planet appears to be closer? So remember, the object that is closest to you tends to be larger than the object that is furthest away. The object that is furthest away will be smaller. So here, since this is my interactive slide, and I know because my rainbow is here in the corner, I will go ahead and place these little cards to mark my answer. So which one is furthest away and which one is closer? So I will label it as I need to. And when I'm done, I will leave my title cards there, and you'll see that the edit was made seconds ago. So now let's go off to our next interactive slide indicated by the rainbow. If we move the red planet so that it overlaps the blue planet, what happens? What if we move the red planet so that it overlaps the blue planet? Does that change your answer? Drag and drop the title cards to mark your answer. And then add your response. What do you think? And if you feel that you don't need to use a card, then you won't need to. But if you don't, explain why. And even if you do, still explain why you chose your response. And you will type right here where it says click to add text. So again, Drag and drop the title cards to mark your answer and then explain why you chose that answer in this little box here off to the side where it says click to add text. Placement. Things that are positioned higher up on the page, often closer to the horizon line, appear to be further away, while things that are placed closer to the bottom of the page appear to be closer. And it says this because this is interactive, indicated by our rainbow here again. Use the title cards to mark the tube that looks closest and which looks furthest away. And when you're done, leave your cards there and make sure your work is saving as you go. Detail. No rainbow? This means we gotta read. So let's look at it. Detail. Things that are closer will appear to have more detail and be more in focus than things that are further away. Look at our flowers here. Very nice, beautiful flowers. Look at how much detail you can see here. But look, there's still so many of them over there in the back, but can you see the detail that is on them? No, it looks blurry, right? So we gotta make sure when we're trying to represent something in art that has a lot of perspective or depth of illusion, that we know what we're doing in terms of the detail. So if it's closer to you, add more detail. If it's further away, you don't need that much detail. Let's look at our interactive slide. Based on what you know about creating depth, using detail, label the basketballs below based on how close they look to the viewer, and then explain why you labeled them how you did. So remember, the closest it is to you, the more closer it is, the more detail it'll have. If it's in the middle, I would say that it'll have some detail, but not as much. And when it's furthest away, it'll have less detail and it'll almost look a little blurry. And then click to add text. I think that the closest basketball is, and then continue your response. Color and value. Things that are closer to us generally look darker and warmer in color. They look a whole lot more richer. While things that are further away look lighter in color and they're cool. They're cool colored. So notice how it is closer. They're a little warmer and darker. And as they get further away in this beautiful photo, this appears to be lighter. So this is atmospheric perspective, and this is a really great example of what we just talked about here in this slide. Value. When highlights and shadows are added to objects, it helps to make them look like they're occupying space and blocking light, thus creating depth. Let's look at this black circle over here off to the left. I don't have any value here. It looks flat. But if I take that same circle and add value, which is light and dark, right? My highlight is here and my shadow is here. It looks so much more in depth. It is 3D now. Notice how the circle again looks flat and the sphere on the right looks round. And that is because of the highlight and the shadows. So that's a little clue on value. Let's look at linear perspective. Linear perspective is a type of perspective in which the relative size, shape, and position of objects are determined by drawn or imagined lines converging at a point on the horizon line. So look at my horizon line. This is perspective. This is a linear perspective, 1 point. It has one point, and these lines converge, meaning they lead to a point in the horizon. And this is an example of that. So utilizing the techniques of overlapping, scale, and placement, arrange the drag and drop objects into the landscape below so that it appears to have depth. And guess what you can do? You can drag and drop and look at what I'm doing. Make sure you're mindful of what you're using and where you're placing them. Remember, objects closer to you are a whole lot larger, and objects that are furthest away are a whole lot smaller. You can also remember we're using techniques of overlapping. I'm gonna put my piggy hiding behind the tree. And also placement and scale. Scale, again, is how small or large something is based off of its placement. And there we go. And once I'm all done, the very last step that you need to go ahead and do is, of course, great work going through this, reading everything. And I've went along and read it with you here. And now it is your turn to go ahead and fill everything out. Remember that you've made sure that on the slides with the rainbow icon that you've completed your work and that it is not blank. When you're ready to turn in your work, all you need to do is close the window and then click turn in, and it should submit all of your work to me.